Hello, everyone. Today I want to share my story with you. My name is Clara, and I never imagined I would experience something that would transform my existence forever. But here I am, writing this because I feel I need to share what happened to me. I died. I crossed over to the other side, and what I saw there was something I could have never predicted. I met Jesus, and what he showed me about a specific people completely changed my view of the world. It wasn't just a dream or an illusion. It was a revelation. I am still trying to understand all of this, but there is one thing I know for sure. This truth must be told. It was an ordinary day, or at least it seemed so. I woke up early, made my cup of coffee, and followed my morning routine as I always did. Nothing seemed out of place, but there was something different, something I couldn't quite grasp. I had no idea that in just a few hours my life would take a turn I could never have imagined. I grabbed my car keys and left for work, as I did every morning. The sky was overcast, the air thick, as if the world itself was trying to warn me of something. But I didn't notice. My mind was too occupied with daily worries, bills, deadlines, problems that seemed to consume my thoughts. Then it happened. Suddenly, a piercing pain shot through my chest. It was unlike anything I had ever felt before. Intense, suffocating, and terrifying. I tried to breathe, but the air wouldn't come. My vision began to darken, and everything around me seemed to slow down. The cars, the buildings, the people on the sidewalk, everything moved in slow motion. I don't remember exactly when I lost control of the car, but I do remember the sound of tires screeching on the asphalt and the brutal impact that followed. The world spun around me, and then everything went silent. The next thing I recall is lying on the asphalt, looking up at the sky. I could hear voices, distant sirens, people shouting, but nothing felt real. While I was there, lying on the ground, something strange began to happen. The pain that had once seemed unbearable started to fade away, and in its place arose an indescribable feeling of peace. It was as if all the worries, fears, and tensions I carried simply evaporated. There was no more anguish, no more fear. I couldn't tell if I was still alive, but somehow that no longer mattered. It was then that I realized something was happening to me. In an instant, I was no longer in my body. Somehow, I was above it, observing everything from a perspective that made no sense. I saw the paramedics rushing to me, a woman crying near the accident, my own body motionless on the asphalt. But I didn't feel despair or terror, only a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching a movie. I tried to scream, to call out to someone, but no sound emerged. I felt weightless, as if I were floating, being pulled away from there. It was in that moment that I realized I was dying. At first, I didn't understand what was happening. One moment I felt my body weakening on the ground, and the next I was being pulled upward with no control over it. It was as if an invisible force was guiding me, not in a hurry, but with a clear purpose. There was no resistance within me, only a peace I had never felt before. I looked down and saw the chaos of the world I was leaving behind. Ambulances, desperate people. But all of that seemed distant, almost irrelevant. Then I saw the light. At first, it was just a dot on the horizon, small but brilliant. As the seconds passed, it grew, becoming more and more intense, yet not blinding. Unlike ordinary light, this light seemed alive, pulsating with a warm, inviting heat. It was as if it were calling me, inviting me to something greater. As I drew closer, everything around me began to disappear. There were no more sounds, no fear, no memories of the life I once knew. There was only that light, and a feeling of love so strong that it completely enveloped me. And then, just as I was about to fully cross over to the other side, I heard a voice. The voice wasn't shrill, but at the same time it echoed within me with an indescribable force. "It is not your time yet." Those words resonated in my soul, And at that moment, everything around me changed. The light that had once drawn me began to dissipate, and I realized I was in a different place. It wasn't Earth, yet it wasn't completely unknown either. It seemed like an intermediate space, a place of transition between two worlds. The air there was thick, laden with something I couldn't define. It was then that I looked ahead, and I saw him. At the end of that space, a figure stood out. He didn't need to introduce himself, for my spirit immediately knew who he was. Jesus. His presence was so strong that it paralyzed me. He radiated a light that came not only from his body, but from his very essence. It was love, peace, and power, all at once. I felt a mixture of reverence and emotion as I gazed at him. And then, without a word being spoken, my entire life flashed before my eyes. Every moment, every choice, every mistake, and every act of kindness, it was all there, laid bare before him. But to my surprise, in his gaze there was no judgment, only understanding. Before I could say anything, Jesus raised his hand, and in an instant everything around me changed once again. I was no longer in that intermediate space, nor before the light. Now I was in a vast place, impossible to describe with human words. It wasn't Earth, but there was something familiar about it. The ground shone with a golden light. The sky was neither blue nor dark, but something beyond comprehension. I felt that this was a place where truth was revealed without distortions. And it was there that Jesus showed me something that would transform my vision forever. Before me, images began to appear as if they were being painted in the air. At first, I saw ancient lands filled with powerful civilizations, cities built with knowledge and purpose. These were places that somehow I knew had existed, but that the world had forgotten or erased. Amidst this vision, Jesus said, "The truth about them has been distorted." In that moment, I understood that he was referring to a specific people, a people who carried a special connection with the divine, but who had been deceived about their own identity. As the images continued to unfold, I felt my heart race. What he was showing me was much greater than I could have ever imagined. The vision shifted again, and what I saw next filled me with a mixture of awe and sorrow. I saw a strong, wise, and spiritually connected people living in harmony with divine principles. They possessed knowledge that went beyond the material, comprehended the mysteries of creation, and had a direct bond with the Creator. But then everything began to change. I saw chains, I saw suffering, I saw a deliberate attempt to erase their identity. Entire peoples were torn from their lands, separated from their origins, and forced to forget who they truly were. I could feel their pain as if it were inside me. Jesus looked at me, and his expression was one of deep sorrow, yet also of hope. "The truth has been hidden from them," he said, "because those who fear him know the power they carry." My heart raced. What I was witnessing wasn't just history, it was a spiritual battle spanning centuries. The oppression wasn't only physical, it was spiritual. It was an effort to break that people's connection with God, to make them forget the greatness for which they were created. But then the vision changed again, and I saw something that filled me with hope. The awakening was beginning. What I saw next made my heart beat strongly. The darkness that had fallen upon that people was not eternal. Gradually, the truth was emerging. I saw men and women beginning to awaken, questioning the lies that had been told for generations. I saw invisible chains breaking, not only physical ones, but mental and spiritual as well. They were beginning to remember who they really were. The vision expanded, and I saw that this change was happening not just in one place, but in various parts of the world. It was as if a flame was being lit within each of them. Jesus looked at me again and spoke firmly. "The time of restoration is coming." I felt that deeply. This wasn't just a story of the past, but a prophecy of what was happening now. The world had been fed lies for centuries, but the truth could never be buried forever. The awakening wouldn't be easy. There would be resistance, attempts to silence this truth, but the light had already been ignited. Then Jesus extended his hand, and the vision shifted once more. What he showed me next made me understand that this battle was far from over. Before me, the images became more intense. I saw forces working to impede this awakening, forces that were not merely human, but spiritual. I saw how the truth had been twisted over the centuries, how systems had been created to keep this people in a state of forgetfulness and limitation. The manipulation went far beyond what I had imagined. Not just physical or social oppression, but a profound spiritual blockade. I saw how distractions, fear, and division were used to keep them away from the connection they had always had with God. Then Jesus said something that made my entire body shudder. If they knew who they truly are, the world would never be the same. That phrase echoed within me with an indescribable weight. Everything I had learned, everything modern history recounted, seemed insignificant in the face of this revelation. I saw that this awakening would not affect only this people, but the entire world. There was a reason why this truth had been hidden, and now that it was beginning to emerge, those who had always tried to suppress it would do everything in their power to prevent it. But Jesus smiled, and at that moment I realized that despite the difficulties, this truth could no longer be stopped. The vision shifted again, and now I saw the future. I saw a great division in the world. On one side, those who embraced the truth and awakened to their divine identity. On the other, those who resisted, clinging to the lies that had been imposed for generations. The battle wasn't only external, but internal as well. I saw people facing conflicts within themselves, questioning everything they had learned. Some accepted the truth and grew stronger, while others, consumed by fear, rejected what was right before their eyes. Then I saw something even more impressive. The awakening wasn't limited to one specific group. It was spreading, reaching people from all backgrounds. I saw nations being transformed. I saw ancient systems crumbling as a new consciousness emerged. But I also saw resistance. Powerful forces were trying to keep people in ignorance, using fear, distractions, and even violence to prevent the truth from being fully revealed. But what these forces didn't understand was that once a light is ignited within someone, it can never be extinguished. The time of silence was over. Jesus looked at me with seriousness, but also with compassion. The world is changing, and many are not prepared, he said. Those who awaken will need courage, for the truth brings its own challenges. At that moment, I saw a wave of turbulent events taking place on Earth. Natural disasters, conflicts, desperate attempts to maintain control over the population, but at the same time, I saw something incredible. People uniting, recovering their faith, strengthening their spiritual bonds. It was as if a new era were being born amid the chaos. My heart pounded. I wanted to ask so many questions, to understand everything that was happening. But before I could speak, Jesus extended his hand and enveloped me in a brilliant light. In an instant, everything disappeared. The vision, the space I was in, everything dissolved around me. I felt as if I were being pulled back, descending rapidly through an invisible tunnel. My body seemed to vibrate with an indescribable energy, and then suddenly I felt a strong jolt. My chest expanded in search of air, my eyes opened, and I was back. The sound of hospital machines filled the room. My chest was rising and falling quickly as I tried to understand where I was. Doctors and nurses rushed around me, adjusting wires and speaking words I couldn't process. My family was there too, eyes filled with tears, holding me as if I might disappear again at any moment. But inside, I knew that something had changed forever. I was no longer the same person who had left home that morning. I had seen something that would transform my life forever. In the first days after waking up, I tried to convince myself that it had all been just a delirium caused by the accident. Perhaps my mind had created that experience to protect me from death, but the more I tried to forget, the more that memory haunted me. Jesus' voice still echoed inside me. The images he showed me were engraved on my soul. I knew I had received that revelation for a reason, but how could I tell the world something so immense? Who would believe me? The first time I tried to speak about what I had experienced, I was met with looks of disbelief. I gathered my family and closest friends, determined to tell them what Jesus had shown me. I spoke about my near-death experience, about what I saw on the other side, and above all, about the revelation that had been given to me. But as soon as I finished, silence filled the room. "Clara, you went through a trauma," my sister said softly. "Maybe it was just a dream, an hallucination." I shook my head. It wasn't a dream. It was real. I tried to explain again, trying to convey the intensity of what I saw, but I realized they weren't ready to accept it. Some changed the subject. Others tried to comfort me as if I were in shock. But I knew the truth. And if my own family didn't want to listen, who would? Even with the initial rejection, something inside me told me that I couldn't stop. I began to share my experience with other people, hoping to find someone who felt the same calling. I spoke in religious groups, talked with acquaintances, and even posted my testimony online. But whenever I touched on the truth that Jesus had shown me, I faced resistance. Some people listened with curiosity, but most looked at me with skepticism. Some said I was misinterpreting, others insisted it was just a side effect of my near-death experience. Then, something strange began to happen. My messages started disappearing from social media. Videos I recorded about my experience vanished without explanation. My phone would turn off by itself while I was writing about what I saw. At first, I thought it was a coincidence, technical problems. But when I received a call from an unknown number, and upon answering, only heard heavy breathing on the other end, I realized that something bigger was at work. There was something or someone trying to silence me. That night, as I tried to sleep, a strange feeling took hold of me. It was as if something were watching me. The room was dark, yet a dense presence filled the air. My heart began to race for no apparent reason. Then I saw a shadow moving on the wall, even though nothing could have cast it. My body froze. I tried to speak, but no sound came out. Fear paralyzed me for a moment until a memory came to mind. Jesus. Summoning all the strength I had, I whispered, "In the name of Jesus, go away." In that very moment, the shadow disappeared. The air in the room seemed lighter, and my breathing returned to normal. My body still trembled, but I knew I had faced something real. It wasn't merely human resistance, it was something spiritual. Since returning to life, I had been trying to tell the truth, and now it was clear that invisible forces were fighting to silence me. But if Jesus chose me to see all this, then I wouldn't give up. After that night, I knew I was involved in something much bigger than I had imagined. It wasn't just about telling my story, but about facing a spiritual battle that had been waging for centuries. The attempts to silence me did not stop. Strange messages kept coming, and files related to my testimony kept disappearing. But instead of frightening me, it only reinforced my determination. If forces were working to hide this truth, then it was because this truth was too powerful to be ignored. It was then that I decided I could no longer rely solely on casual conversations. I needed to reach more people. I began to share my experience more broadly, writing texts, recording videos, and connecting with others who also felt that something was changing in the world. Gradually, reactions began to shift. Some still doubted, but many started to listen, and not just listen, but feel. I received messages from people saying that my words awakened something within them, something they had always known but never managed to explain. At first, I thought I was alone on this journey, but soon I realized I wasn't. Other people from different places and backgrounds began to share similar experiences. Some had also had visions. Others had always felt that the story we were taught about the world was incomplete. Piece by piece, things began to fit together. What Jesus showed me wasn't just an isolated revelation. It was part of something much larger, a truth that was coming to light and that many had tried to keep hidden. But with this expansion came even more resistance. I received anonymous threats, warnings to stop talking about what I had seen. Some of my accounts were blocked without explanation, and even people who had once supported me began to distance themselves. But by then, I had no doubts. This was a real battle, and I could not back down. The fear I had felt in the beginning was replaced by an unshakable certainty. If Jesus showed me this truth, it was because he wanted me to share it. Then one night, something happened that confirmed everything I had already suspected. While I was praying, asking God to guide me on what to do next, I felt a different presence. But this time, it wasn't something dark trying to stop me. On the contrary, it was a light, a peace that filled the room like never before. I closed my eyes and, in an instant, was overcome by a vision. I saw the world transforming before me. I saw a mass awakening taking place, people seeing the truth, reclaiming their identity, and reconnecting with the divine. But the vision wasn't only one of hope. I also saw the struggle that would come before the restoration. I saw fear being used as a weapon, confusion being spread to try to contain what was happening. I saw people being discredited, manipulated, and even persecuted for daring to speak the truth. Yet amid all this turbulence, the light continued to shine. The awakening could not be stopped. What Jesus had shown me was only just beginning, and no matter what forces tried to prevent it, the world was changing, and that change was inevitable. After that vision, I could no longer hesitate. I needed to keep speaking, no matter the cost. I began to share everything with even greater intensity, recounting not only what I saw, but what was happening around me. And to my surprise, more people began to awaken. They told me that they had always felt something was wrong, that the story we were taught wasn't complete. More and more voices joined this wave of revelation, and that only made me more certain that I was on the right path. But the more I spoke, the more resistance grew. My videos were deleted, my words were censored, and the spiritual attacks continued. But now, I knew how to face them. Every time the darkness tried to stop me, I turned to Jesus. I prayed, strengthened my faith, and remembered the mission I had been given. The battle wasn't just mine. It was that of all those who were awakening. And no matter how hard they tried to silence us, it was already too late. The truth was coming to light, and nothing could stop it. Every day I felt that the spiritual battle around me intensified. It wasn't just about telling my story, it was about fighting against centuries of manipulation and fear. I saw people awakening, but I also saw others desperately clinging to the lies they had been taught. Some resisted the truth because it was easier to live in illusion than to accept that everything they knew was incomplete. Yet deep down, I knew I couldn't force anyone to see. My role was only to speak, to plant the seed, and let the truth find those who were ready to receive it. And then, something unexpected happened. One day, one of my posts went viral. In just a few hours, thousands of people were commenting, sharing, and debating my experience. Some tried to discredit me, others simply ignored it. But the most important thing was that many were listening. I began receiving messages from people saying that they had felt something profound when reading my account, as if something inside them had awakened. That showed me that the truth didn't need to be accepted by everyone at once. It was enough to reach those who were ready to listen, and they would help spread the message even further. But along with this expansion came the attacks, and this time they weren't just skeptics trying to discredit me. Something bigger was at work. I began receiving strange messages, warnings to stop talking about what I had seen. My emails were hacked, my posts disappeared without explanation, and even close friends began telling me to be careful. At first, I tried to ignore it, but then I received an anonymous message that made me freeze. "Stop now. This is bigger than you think." My heart raced. In that moment, I realized that I wasn't just facing human resistance, but something deeper, something that didn't want this truth to be revealed. But fear could not stop me. If Jesus chose me to see all this, then he would also give me the strength to move forward. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and prayed. In that instant, an indescribable peace enveloped me. I knew that no matter what happened, I was not alone in this struggle. After that night, I understood that the fight wasn't only against visible forces. I was facing something that operated in the shadows, something that used fear as a weapon to keep people trapped in ignorance. But now I knew the truth, and retreat was not an option. I continued sharing my message, even knowing the risks. And the more I spoke, the more people joined this awakening. It was as if a veil were being torn apart, and those who had been asleep began to see what had always been right in front of them. However, I also saw that this battle would not be easy. Many were still trapped in the illusions of the world, refusing to accept that something much greater was happening. I saw people being manipulated, distracted, and led to believe that this change was nothing more than an unfounded theory. But at the same time, I saw those who chose to embrace the truth growing in strength and understanding. They were reconnecting with something that had been taken from them for generations, reclaiming their faith and identity. And deep down, I knew that this was only the beginning. Then one night while I was praying, I was taken by a new vision. I saw the future, not a distant future, but something that was about to happen. I saw the world being shaken by unexpected events, disasters, conflicts, revelations that would shake the very foundations that had always governed society. But amid all that chaos, I saw something even more powerful. I saw people awakening en masse, reclaiming their true identity, liberating themselves from the lies that had been imposed upon them. What once seemed impossible was now happening before my eyes. Jesus was by my side in the vision, and when I looked at him, I understood without him having to say a word. The transformation of the world would come with challenges, but also with a promise. The truth could no longer be hidden. Those who were ready to listen would hear. Those who were ready to see would see. But each person would have to make a choice: continue living in illusions or accept the truth and walk in the light. And then he said, "The battle has already begun, but the victory belongs to those who are not afraid to see." I awoke from that vision with my heart pounding, feeling a weight and urgency I had never experienced before. I knew that what Jesus had shown me was not just a message for me, but a warning for the world. Time was running out, and those who were awakening needed to act. But how could I make more people listen? How could I convince those still blinded by fear and misinformation? The answer came to me like a whisper: keep speaking, keep spreading the truth even when no one wants to listen. So that's what I did. It didn't matter if some called me crazy or tried to silence me. I continued sharing, I continued writing, I continued warning those who were ready to listen. And gradually, I realized I was no longer alone. Others were having dreams, visions, feeling that something was happening. People who had never considered spirituality before began questioning the narratives that had been imposed on them. The awakening was spreading, and nothing could stop it. But just as the light spread, so did the darkness stir. spiritual attacks became more frequent. Strange problems occurred every time I tried to speak openly about my experience. My videos were removed, my words distorted. Even those close to me began questioning as if I were making everything up. But I had already learned that every bit of resistance meant one thing. The truth was making people uncomfortable. If forces were trying to silence me, it was because I was exposing something that was meant to remain hidden. Then I finally understood. My role was not to convince anyone, not to force anyone to see. My role was to speak, to share what I saw, and to let each person choose their own path. Because the awakening couldn't be imposed, it had to come from within. And it was at that moment that I realized something even deeper. This battle wasn't just mine. Every person who awakened became part of this movement, and the more of us that rose, the stronger the light became. The transformation was happening before my eyes. More and more people were beginning to question, to seek answers they had never considered before. And this wasn't just an individual change, it was collective. I saw communities forming, connections being restored, people uniting to reclaim what had been taken from them. The fear that once held them back was disappearing, and in its place emerged a courage I had never seen before. But then, Jesus showed me something that made me understand what was yet to come. The battle was not over. The awakening was only just beginning, and those who tried to hide the truth would not give up easily. There would be more resistance, more challenges, more distractions to try to keep people trapped in illusion. But the choice had already been placed before everyone. The time of ignorance was coming to an end, and those who chose the truth would never be the same. After that final revelation, I understood that the decisive moment was approaching. The forces that had always worked to keep this truth hidden would do everything they could to prevent more people from awakening. But now, it was already too late. The truth had been sown, and those with eyes to see were already beginning to see. The fear that once kept them captive was dissolving, and in its place arose an unyielding determination. Jesus made me understand that this was not a physical fight, but a spiritual one. It wasn't about external conflicts, but about the battle within each of us. I saw that many people were still in doubt, trapped by the lies that had been fed to them for generations. But I also saw that the light was growing, and that those who embraced the truth were becoming stronger than ever. This was the beginning of a new era, a time when people's spiritual identity could no longer be erased or distorted. With that understanding came a clear calling to continue speaking, to keep spreading this message no matter the cost. I knew I would face more challenges, that the attempts to silence me would continue, but none of that mattered anymore. The truth was greater than any resistance, and I wasn't alone. Others were already awakening, uniting in this journey, sharing their own revelations. It was as if an invisible network were being woven, connecting those who were ready for this change. And that's when I understood what Jesus wanted from me. He didn't just show me the truth, he gave me a mission that wasn't just mine, but for everyone who is hearing this message now, because this awakening didn't depend on a single voice, but on many. What began as a personal revelation was now a movement, something that grew with each passing day. The world was changing, and this truth was spreading, not because someone wanted it, but because it was the right time. The most astonishing part was realizing that this awakening wasn't about division, but about restoration. It wasn't about pitting one group against another, but about bringing forth a truth that had been suffocated for generations. I saw people from different backgrounds uniting, recognizing that this revelation wasn't just about one people, but about all of us. It was about reconnecting with something the world had tried to make us forget, our spiritual identity and our purpose. But Jesus also warned me that not everyone would accept this truth. Some would choose to remain in darkness, trapped by fear and manipulation. Others would try to fight this change, attempting to discredit or distort the message. But none of that mattered anymore, because the transformation had already begun. Those who were ready to awaken would awaken. Those who were ready to listen would listen. The truth was spreading like wildfire, and no one could extinguish it. And then Jesus said something that echoed within me with an indescribable force. The time is drawing near. The world must prepare. His words were not a threat, but a warning. The awakening wasn't optional. It was inevitable. The truth would come to light, with or without resistance. I saw that those who chose to embrace it would be strengthened, guided, and protected. But those who opted to ignore or fight it would face difficult times, for the old world could no longer sustain itself under so many lies. In that moment, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. My mission was not to force anyone to be convinced. My mission was to speak, to share what I saw, and to allow each person to choose their own path. The choice had always been in each one's hands. The world was changing, and now it was up to each person to decide which side of the story they wanted to be on. The awakening had begun, and nothing could stop it. After that final revelation, I felt a clarity I had never experienced before. The fear, the doubt, the uncertainty, everything vanished. I knew I would face challenges, that resistance would still exist, but now I understood that none of that mattered. What mattered was continuing to spread this message, because those destined to listen would listen. The truth didn't need to be imposed, it just needed to be shared, and every person who accepted it would help to spread it even further. So, if you are reading this now, know that it is not by chance. You were guided to this message for a reason. Something inside you already feels that the world is changing, that something greater is happening, and now the choice is in your hands. You can ignore this calling, continue living as before, pretending that nothing is happening, or you can accept the truth, awaken, and become part of this transformation. The decision is yours. But remember, once the truth is seen, there is no turning back. The time is now. I do not know for how much longer I will be able to speak of this. The attempts to silence me continue, and I know that the more this message spreads, the more resistance it faces. But that doesn't matter. The awakening has begun, and it cannot be stopped. What was hidden is being revealed. What was forgotten is being remembered. And every person who accepts this truth becomes part of this change. If this message has touched you, share it, talk about it, research, question, seek for yourself. Do not accept the lies that have been told for so long. The choice has always been in your hands, and now, more than ever, it is time to decide. Will you remain in the dark, or will you walk in the light? The time is drawing near. The truth is here, and it is up to you to decide what you will do with it. If you have read this far, leave a word of support in the comments. It means that this message was meant for you. Nothing happens by chance. The world is changing, and now it is up to you to decide which side of the story you want to be on. The awakening has begun, and the truth is coming to light. You can ignore it or accept it, but know that once your eyes are opened, there is no going back. And if you want to continue discovering more about these hidden truths and revelations that many try to conceal, subscribe to the channel right now. We have new videos every day, always at the same time, bringing deep reflections, supernatural experiences, and everything you need to know to prepare for what is to come. Activate the notification bell so you don't miss anything, and share this message with those who need to hear it. See you in the next video.